Welcome everyone. I am so happy to be here. I want to show you in this video just some few tricks on what I do when I want to make up a menu system. Now I'm doing this totally unrehearsed. I'm not reading from anything that I pre-written. So this is going to be probably mistake ridden, but I like to do it that way so you can see that number one, I make mistakes just like everybody else does, but how you can fix your mistakes and find what you did wrong and how to correct them. So hopefully there won't be too many, but I'm sure there will be. So let's go, and right off the bat, we're going to display a menu system. Then we're going to force the user to give us good input. So let's go right off the bat here, and let's create a function prototype called display menu. And then we'll create the definition. And a little trick I always do is put a comment for the closing bracket. So this way, if I delete a bracket or I have nested brackets, it's so much easier for me to see what's happened here. So we have this one here. And then remember, you always want to put in anything that you're doing. The purpose of this function is to print a menu or whatever. So you would fill that in here. So we're going to do a simple cout, and I'm going to do a press 1 for selection 1, press 2 for selection 2, and so on. So we'll type in press 1 for selection 1. Now notice I'm not putting a \n. I'm putting in an NL. There's two issues with the \n. One is it doesn't clear the keyboard buffer, but two, not all systems recognize escape sequences. As you learn regex, you might come into across an issue where you put in an escape sequence and all of a sudden it doesn't work. So let's go and copy and paste this, and we'll do 4 in this particular one. So we're going to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And this one's going to be to exit. So this will be selection 2, and this will be selection 3. And then what we can do is we can put in a prompt that says, enter your selection. But what we're going to do is actually leave that for get selection. And you can do it whatever way you want. This is the way I do it. So we'll check back with that later on. So we're going to need another function, and we're going to return an integer, and it's going to be called get selection. So what we do here is we will create this as well. And again, we have get selection. Now here's a little trick that I always do whenever I have a function returning something. I comment out the return statement. Why do I do that? Because notice what it does. It has a return 0 here. So as a result, if I try to compile and I forget that I never changed anything, no matter what I do, I'm going to get 0. So if I try to compile now, I should get a nasty error saying that get selection must return a value. So let's see if it does, and we have some errors, and get selection must return a value. All right, so good. So Visual Studio did its job. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create an integer, and we'll call it selection. And I always like to initialize everything. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to type cout. What is your selection, or enter selection, whatever you want to do. Now notice the space, and notice there is no end line here. Then I'm going to do a simple cin and selection. So there's a couple issues with this, but right now it's no big deal. And then we're going to return selection. And we'll get rid of these, and we're good. So the first issue is there's no error checking in here. So we only want a 1, 2, 3, or 4, but what's going to happen is if I press 5, it's going to be, hey, it's going to return 5. If I press A, it's going to be an issue in there. So we're going to talk about it in another video that I have a bunch of functions that lets you to get an integer using strings. So that's for another video. So let's just take a look at this right now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me run this program just displaying the menu and show you a little trick. So we're going to type in here, display menu. And we should run it, and everything should just play the menu and then do absolutely nothing. So let me try that again. And here we go. So now we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 to exit. So here's a little problem. Suppose we decide, oh, I forgot menu selection 4. We need to adjust. So that means I have to add 4 and then change this to 5. And then if I'm doing anything with 4, I have to adjust all that code. So let's do this. Let's create right off the bat a exit value or a sentinel value. So I like to use the word sentinel. So we want a constant integer, and we'll call it sentinel. And we're going to set it equal to 4. Instead of displaying press 4, we're going to display the sentinel. And we have to get rid of that extra space. So let's run this again and see what happens now. So right now, everything looks the same. Press 1 for this, 2, 3, and now 4. So now you decide, hey, I'm going to add another menu selection. So now all I have to do is change this to 5. So we're not going to add another menu selection, but let's just say we added 2 more, and now it's up to 6. All we have to do is change that to 6, and look what happens. And we have 1, 2, 3, and 6. So we're looking good. So now what we need to do is write our get selection. It's fairly easy, and we're going to return something. So what I want to do here is leave it for right now, and I'm going to make another half of this video in here to see how we can enhance this. So we have over here, what is your selection, get selection. But if we press a 5, we're not going to do very good. So what we need to do here is get some error checking. So this is the way I like to do it, and there's many other ways to do it, but this is the way that I like to do it. So let's create a Boolean, and we'll just call this invalid selection. And we'll set it to true. Another option could be to need data. So either way is the same, so let's just change it. Invalid has got such a negative connotation, so let's just go need selection. So the first thing we're going to do is put this in a do-while loop, because we want to make sure that the user is going to give us what we're asking for. And first thing we're going to do here is get the selection. Then we need to check the selection. But we also need to finish our while. So while need selection. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to set our selection and see if indeed we are in good shape. So we're going to do need selection equals selection is less than 1. And I know I spelled selection wrong. And then we want or selection is greater than, the Sentinel. Now, here's the advantage of doing this, because if we change the Sentinel, I don't have to go back in here and change this to 4. And it looks like I have an error here, so let's see what this is, and this is what it is here. So we have 1, 2, 3, so we're looking good here. And we can do here now is if need selection, then we'll tell the user see out invalid choice valid are 1, 2 Sentinel. Now again, we're using Sentinel a whole bunch of times, and we don't have to change anything except for the one at the top in here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a whole bunch of things that are bad. So we'll do something that's less than the valid one, then we'll do something that's higher. And let's see how that works. So we have our menu system here. And let's go and press nothing, because we're not doing anything. And the reason why we're not doing anything is because we are not calling the get selection. So that would make sense that we do that. So we need an integer, and we'll call it selection. Now notice I'm not doing integer selection equals get selection. So let's go and do a selection equals get selection. We don't need to pass anything. So let's try this again. So what we would do is put this in a loop until we get the actual Sentinel value. So that'll be our first section without it. Then we'll go and do it with it. So let's go back and run it again. See if we actually ask to put in a menu selection. So what is your selection? So let's start off with 0. It should give us an error message. Invalid choice, valid or 1 for. So let's try 5. Invalid choice, let's try 10. Invalid choice, and let's try 1. And we're good. So what I always do next is make sure that I printed out the right value and return the right value. And let's do C out selection. And this is just to make sure that we're returning the correct value. So we're going to run it again. And we'll try 2 this time, and it should say 2. And that's good. So that's a good thing. So now let's go, and we have the Sentinel up here. So what we want to do is we want to keep doing things until we get the Sentinel. Now we are missing a step called process selection, but we'll get to that in the next video. So let's just stick to this one here. We'll do some short videos. Let's just do, and then a simple while selection does not equal Sentinel. Oh, there's that Sentinel goal. So now we don't have to change anything. So if we hard-coded 4, we would have to change this here. We would have to change, you see we have an error, so we'll have to take a look and see what's going on here. We would have to change this, and we would have to change this, and we would have to change this. So we have an error here, which I don't know why, but sometimes when you click somewhere else, that goes away. It did not. So if you see we have an error, then all we need to do is say, oh, okay, you're missing a bracket. So, or a brace. So now we should be good to go. So let's go, and you know what? Let's take that out, and let's see what error message we get, because a lot of times the error message does not coincide exactly what the problem is. So let's go and see. And there are build errors, and expected while, expected this. So this wasn't too bad. So now we know what this is. So let's go and run this a bunch of times. And we have, let's do 1, let's do 2, let's do 3, let's do 1 again, let's do 5, it should kick us out. And now let's do 4, which is the select in here. And that works out good. So now you have a simple start to your project 3, which is going to have a menu to do certain things. It should be 1, 2, and 3. And then what you can do is you can use this code if you want. We'll have this ready available for you. And the next thing we're going to do here, and we'll do that in our next video, is we will create we're going to do we could probably do a void. We do a void here. And we'll call it process selection. But in this particular case, we have to pass an integer, which would be our selection. So let's create the function definition for that. And we're good here. And we can call this selection. We can call it choice. And there's many ways to do it. I like to do it with a switch statement. So right now we're good to go. And so we will have a second part of this video where I'll actually show you how to process the selection in here using a simple switch statement. Then remember, in Project 3, you're going to be using maps. So one of the selection is going to be to add an item or search for an item because you're actually reading it from a file. So you're going to search to see if it exists. And the other one is going to be whether to print how many times it exists or to print a little histogram with stars. It sounds hard, but it's really not, because maps are nothing more than a key and a pair. And remember, the key has to be unique, and the pair would be the actual item. So you could have apples, could be a key, and then you can put in whatever number you want to put in there. So that would be 1, and then pair would be 1. So you would start everything with 0, but then you would just add to it every time you do it. So we're going to work on that one in our next video, show you how to do a generic process selection. Don't get intimidated upon maps. They're very easy. Just remember, it's a key and a lookup. So basically, it's like going to an index on a page, and you have whatever it is, page 43. So you only have one particular item, and you can only have one particular value itself. So you have a lookup, which would be apples, pears, bananas, and that doesn't have to be a numeric. It could be a string, which in this particular case it is. And then you have the amount of times that it happens to be in there. So that is it for this video. So please leave comments. Let me know how you think. If there's a video that you would like me to make, please let me know that as well, and I would do my best. So that is it, and see you around the corner.